Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Neid, and today we are doing round two because first round we had some technical difficulties, but I really wanted to bring this one to you guys because I think it's a very special conversation. It's going to be a unique topic. I'm joined today by my great friend, Jenna Switzer. Jenna classifies herself as a holistic sex coach. So I know typically we focus on, strength and conditioning, nutrition, things of that nature, but coaching has a lot of different manifestations. And I think in an industry where we are trying to create very deep personal relationships with people, talking about a coaching practice that is as intimate as sexual relationships can provide so much guidance for us parallel to the avenues that we're pursuing. So Jenna, thank you so much for joining me again today and giving up your time because we messed up the first one.
My absolute pleasure. I loved our conversation the first time, so I'm really excited to, have another conversation, maybe touch some of the same stuff and
Yeah,
even go deeper, because we already have this fluency in the conversation.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's start off. Let's give a little bit of a background on how you got into being a sex coach. Because I know you didn't
I
start that way.
I always joke like it's the best job in the world. No, I didn't. I would say like this came as a result of 10 plus years as a full-time yoga teacher. And you know this about me. I was never a yoga teacher in the kind of normal yoga teacher. Like I didn't take the yoga studio path. I was very much into like the biomechanics,
Mhm.
healthy body movements. How can we integrate these practices that were taught in yoga and make them useful and powerful for people in how they move now? There's a really great saying I really like that says, in order for a tradition to continue, it must serve the current generation. So we have
Ooh,
this like traditional practice of yoga. It's like, but in order for that to continue, we need to be able to serve the current generation. So I spent a lot of time in like weightlifting
yeah.
spaces and gyms, and that was the majority of my, we'll say, yoga students were people who would never step into a yoga studio. So it gave me a really interesting perspective on bodies and how they move and how do we integrate these like classical concepts into like physical empowerment. And so how that kind of transitioned into sex coaching is if you have ever focused on the body, you know that after you dive in, the more you dive into something, the more you need to specialize. The body
Mhm.
is such an incredibly complex thing that you kind of naturally end up specializing in one area or another. And, I'd experienced a few experiences like sexual assault in my life that had left me like with problems in my sex life. And I also was a woman that struggled to orgasm when I was younger. And so I was in therapy. I had all kinds of support, but there was still like a piece that was missing. And so I found I was able to integrate a lot of these traditional practices from like Taoist principles and tantric ideas and all of that different stuff. And I was able to kind of bring those in together to create a very practical approach to pleasure and sexuality and intimacy. And it really just felt like an incredible evolution because I'd spent so much time working on the body, and then I started diving into the pelvic floor, the hips, that whole area. And so, I really came at it from this, again, I'll keep saying integrated, like this integrated position of like, here's what we were taught in these older texts, here's the issues we're having today. How do we bring all those things together to create something that really empowers us? Because people, like, it's less common to find people who access sex easily than it is to find people. The majority of us have some sort of struggle sexually. And so it plays out in your confidence, it plays out in your musculature, like core engagement, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm just really passionate about it. I love talking about it. And it's been an incredible experience the last 5 years doing this full time and just like watching people's lives change from that.
Yeah, I think in general, like a coaching practice is whatever vehicle that you use, whether it's training, nutrition, sex coaching. Ultimately, we are in the business of personal growth. We are helping facilitate somebody's personal growth. And what struck me as really interesting in your practice as you moved from yoga to pelvic floor to sex coaching, there was this, yeah, you dove down a rabbit hole, but there were so many parallel thoughts that you just applied across the board. Um, Something that I love to do is I like to read and I like to educate myself outside the field of strength and conditioning because I find that the lessons learned will parallel things that happen in my coaching practice. So it struck
Absolutely.
me as really interesting that, okay, well, we start with yoga, which is traditionally going to be breath work, positions, a lot of isometrics, stretching, but also connecting with your body and mind. And
Mm-hmm.
then you said, okay, well, I have a specific interest in pelvic floor because of my experiences. How does that integrate with my ability to improve pelvic floor mechanics? And then, well, if I improve pelvic floor mechanics, I'm seeing these parallel improvements in other areas of my life. How can I teach others to follow a similar path, but also carve out a niche for myself that is somewhat unique? Like you mentioned, your yoga practice was somewhat unique, your pelvic floor practice was somewhat unique. And now you're carving out this somewhat unique sex coaching practice with this massive toolbox of things that you can address. I think it's really important for people to tease out that you don't have to follow rules, right? You're
No.
definitely not a rule follower.
Not at all. Definitely not a rule follower and not a linear path. I think that's something
Yeah.
really important in coaching. The majority of us who get into coaching, we do it because we're passionate. We do it because like it lights us up. So I think we really do ourselves a disservice when we've decided we want to follow this passion that we have, and then we're like, okay, what are the rules? Like what are the steps to get there? Because that that just doesn't, you can have all the accreditation, but if you don't have that passion, then it amounts to nothing. The ability to empower other people comes from your passion and excitement and your interest. And like you're saying, your personal interest as a coach creates the perspective that will speak the best to your clients, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's really important, is that we understand we're in this because we're passionate people. What are you passionate about? Follow that. Like, don't follow, Joe Schmo who says do these 5 things and
Oh,
whatever.
I I see that so often, especially in the social media space. I see it like, are you someone who blank? These are my 5 tips. It's like, okay, that's a script, man. Like,
Yeah.
just talk to me. Talk to your
Yeah.
audience. Let's get some actual help here. Um, I love I love the concept of there are no rules because ultimately people will say, "Oh, Rome wasn't built in a day," or "There's many paths to get to where you want to go." It's like, yeah, or you could just forge your own fucking path.
Yes.
Like, just just do it.
Yeah. It's so
Um,
true.
so let's dive in a little bit more into your practice because again, I framed our conversation a lot better this time than I did last time. You are dealing with perhaps the most intimate detail of people's lives.
Yeah.
That involves a whole bunch of trust building. That involves a whole bunch of relationship management. How does your coaching practice allow people to ultimately open up to you in a way where you can actually make change?
I think this crosses all coaching. You
Yeah.
will get the best results if your client truly trusts you. That is absolutely true as a sex coach. It is absolutely true as a coach that is facilitating any kind of change, because absolutely people's sexual struggles is very intimate and vulnerable, and it's difficult for people to talk to. There's so much shame and guilt and embarrassment just woven into any conversation around sex. I also think that about your relationship with your body, right?
Mm.
The reason I call it holistic sex coaching is because it's not about, if you angle your body like this during sex, you can get deeper penetration, or, if you find you're getting soft, think about these 5 things. It's like, okay, what's happening in your lifestyle? What is your relationship to your body? That's a huge thing. Do you love your body? Like, if the lights are on and you're having sex, are you so concerned about your own body that you lose interest in sex? Right. And
Yeah.
so that's not about what your sex life is like. That's about what your relationship to your body is like. What is your relationship like? I've worked with clients who, maybe when they were in the locker room, somebody made fun of the size of their dick. And then they carried that with them for years, and the size, it was just in their head. And it's their relationship to their body. And so I feel like it's just really important that we as coaches are, creating this safe space. And I think it's done by, you and I really agree on this part. It's done by approaching things with curiosity. It's done
Mm,
by approaching things not as I'm here to preach to you, to tell you how to get it
yeah.
done. It's how do we uncover what the right steps are for you.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to be a preachy coach, maybe be, I don't know, a life coach. I don't know, be something that's not, dealing with people's like super, super vulnerable places, their relationship to their weight, their relationship to their body, how they feel naked in front of another person, how they feel naked with themselves. These are all like very, very soft spaces in our psyche, in our consciousness. And I think approaching with curiosity, I think coming through it with like a very humble perspective, realizing that you don't know all of the things, and the client in front of you is about to present to you a completely new perspective. And can
Mm.
you be available to observe that in its uniqueness and offer reflections back of other people who had pieces that they experienced that how to bring results for, right?
Right. So there's a lot to tease out of that. I mean, you know, you, at the end you brought in the aspect of evidence. So the fact that you have experience working with a number of different clients and you've seen probably a whole gamut of, we'll call them issues or barriers that people have faced. You've been able to overcome those barriers for those people. Um, but then there's also the element of dealing with the individual in front of you. This is something that for me is super important, and it's actually framed the way that I provide service. So, just using my mentorship program as an example, people will come to me and do consult calls and they'll say, "Okay, what's your system?" I'm like, "My system is your business. I don't have a system. Yes, I have tools that I use. Yes, we have strategies that we can implement. Yeah, we have, procedures. But at the end of the day, if I have a clinician or I have a coach or I have a gym owner, all of these people need different things. So if I was to apply a system, I would be doing them a disservice because the majority of any system won't apply to that person. So for you, you're essentially saying like, I can't know how to help you until I know who you are.
Mhm.
And that process of getting to know someone on a deep level is has to be curious. It has to be open. It has to be judgment free. And the only way to do that is through communication. So
Yes.
I love the way you frame that. One of the things that you said, it was actually off air after we finished our podcast, was about we as coach is something along, I'm going to paraphrase and you can correct me, but it was something along the lines of we as coaches cannot create a safe space for our clients unless they themselves have a safe space. Is that something? Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, so this came up because, obviously working with sexuality, I wanted to be sensitive to the vocabulary I'm using. I am not for everyone. I am keenly aware of that, but I wanted to just make sure I wasn't stepping on people's toes unnecessarily, accidentally. So I was working with this person just to better understand that area. And I said, he's like, well, what's your goal? And I was like, one of my goals is to create a safe space that anyone feels like they can come and speak to me, regardless of their sexual orientation or desires. And this person was like, yeah, okay, so you can never avoid every trigger. It's impossible to know
Yeah.
what the triggers are in the person in front of you. What you can do is encourage them to feel safe in themselves, and that will result in them feeling safe in you with you. Because as a coach, we have this idea that we're like, okay, I'm going to create this safe space. And again, like I'm dealing with a lot of sexual trauma, a lot of, terrible things. And the only way that this person will feel safe is if they feel safe enough in themselves. So, sometimes with a client, it'll start off in one direction. And I'll realize in order for us to be able to drop down into what's really going on here, this person needs to feel safer in themselves. And we as clients, we as people often, what is that, like delegate or offload? I can't remember the word
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for our safety, right? We're like, no, you didn't make me feel safe. No one can do that better than you can do it for you. And
Mm,
you as a coach are creating that for someone. That is life-changing stuff. Me
yeah.
feeling safe with me is a game changer, because it doesn't mean that, nobody out there can cross lines. Of course they can cross lines, but I am safe in myself and I trust that I will take myself out of a situation if it's not appropriate for me. Whereas if you are saying that you're the safe space, then that person is vulnerable if they're with somebody else. The best thing you can do is to support them to feel safe in themselves so that whatever they approach, they feel safe.
I heard a quote recently that plays like perfectly into this. It was something along the lines of the person who was speaking was discussing the concept of vulnerability when it comes to discussing emotions, and it got me thinking a lot about just the word vulnerability, because ultimately in a coaching relationship, you want people to be open and honest, but you don't want them to feel vulnerable, because the word vulnerable means susceptible to attack.
Interesting.
So you don't want the person to feel susceptible to attack when they're being open and honest with you.
No.
And that kind of reframed a lot, because especially in the fitness space, I tend to approach the coaching relationship as this dynamic between, I want someone to look at me as the ideal that they're shooting for, right? I'm supposed to be the product of my product, the example. And that involves them putting me on a pedestal. But I also need to be relatable to them in that I've shared some of their similar experiences, or I've presented evidence of others who have helped. So there's that dichotomy that's created between being the ideal but also being relatable, almost facilitating them to feel more comfortable sharing openly and honestly without feeling vulnerable. But in your industry, I don't even want to call it an industry, in your coaching space, people are talking to you about things that they probably don't want to talk about with their partner, right? The person who they are closest with, should feel safest with, should feel most open with. They're not even comfortable sharing this with them, but they've approached you to help them solve their problem. How do you navigate that dynamic?
To me, a really important piece is, my main goal in any circumstance that's similar to that is, how do we get you to feel so comfortable in your ability to communicate that you can talk to your partner? Because, I had this one client, we met and we talked about, he had this kink that he really, really liked. And he was going outside of his partnership to experience this because he was so ashamed to admit this to his partner. Now, he loves his wife. The way he speaks about his wife is the way, like, we all dream of men speaking about us as wives. It was gorgeous. They have kids. He adores her and was too embarrassed to bring up this thing. And had it have been uncovered, it, like, she could have, like, lost it, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
because it's a sexually intimate act with someone outside of their relationship. So the first goal isn't, like, I don't give a shit about your kink. What I give a shit about is that there's a communication piece with this person that you love and adore, right? So we really worked on this. And I got the most beautiful message, I'll say maybe a week later. And
Mm-hmm.
and he said, it was really awkward. I didn't start off strong, but, like, I remembered some of the things we talked about and, like, how to approach this. He's like, and our sex life is transformed. You were right. She didn't care. She just wanted me to share it with her. I was able to be open. Like, the last 3 days have been the best of our entire relationship as far as like intimacy. Like she feels sexier than she's ever felt. I feel more desire. And like, it's just this beautiful thing that happens when people learn to communicate. And it can be really scary when it comes to your partner because they're your teammate, right? Like they're
Mm-hmm.
they're your co-parent, they're your like co-owner of the house. There's like a lot on the line, and so you feel this sense of like, if I mess this up, it's over. Like, what do they say? Like, almost all divorces are from money or sex, right? And I would love to
Mm-hmm.
see some statistics around sex because I bet it's really high. And so if there's been this dissonance and you're scared to take that step, it's about this, like, can you feel comfortable in yourself? And so again, relating back to this, if you feel safe in yourself, you feel that your kink, your needs, your issues, your desires, whatever it is that's plaguing you, if you feel safe to acknowledge that in yourself, it becomes a lot easier to approach your partner, to approach the person that you love, that you're in this connection with. Or, some people I work with are not in long-term relationships, right? And so they're entering into these new dynamics and they want to know, like, how do I approach this right from the get-go? Because this matters to me. And a great example is men not being able to maintain an erection, right? Being able to like have a conversation around that. Because the biggest fear is like, she's going to freak out or she's going to leave me or I'm not good enough or blah, blah. And that story in your head perpetuates the problem.
Oh, yeah.
So when you feel safe in yourself, when you feel you're able to communicate with someone else, so I'm a great person to talk to about this because there's no judgment. I'm very much more knowledgeable than you are probably about what's happening. And so that becomes a conversation that you're able to have. You've had it once. You're able to feel that in yourself. We work on that sense of like confidence and comfortability, and then you're able to take that into your relationships of any kind. It's super, super powerful. And I think what you said earlier, like communication as a coach to a client,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot learn a better skill. Communicating clearly, making sure that what you're saying is what your client is hearing,
Mm-hmm.
super important. And then what your client is saying is what you're hearing. So not assuming again, circling back to curiosity, I feel like there's so many themes we're just repeating on here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of my perspective on that dynamic.
Yeah. The communication piece for me, it comes down to like the physiology only matters as much as the psychology allows. So the gateway into somebody is through their mind, right? So how they perceive situations, how they interpret their environment. Perception is reality. So if I perceive something to be scary, it's going to be scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's this cup of coffee on my counter or a spider or, whatever, it could be some innocuous object that you have some random fear about, but you perceive it to be scary. So it's going to be scary. The other thing that pops into my mind is like in the whole psychology, physiology thing, a lot of what we do as coaches is provide objectivity. So when people are in these situations where they may feel vulnerable, right? They may feel susceptible to attack. A lot of that has to do with underlying perceptions that are maybe not realistic. So what you're essentially telling me is you're trying to get them to a place where they have a deep understanding of the issue, whether it be a psychological issue or a physiological issue that they can address through a number of different modalities, to return to a place of objectivity where you can say, okay, we now have identified the mechanism of the issue and we can put together some sort of action plan to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a very concise way to put it.
Well, thank you. One thing that I do want to talk about is blending the spiritual or the woo-woo with the science, because you're someone who does both.
Yes.
Right. You're very much into, Uranus and prolapse and,
That is such a good line, especially
it's so
given what
good.
I do. That's really
Yeah,
good.
exactly. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
So, you're very into the spiritual aspect of it, the more, we'll call it out to left field for some people.
We could say
But you also
esoteric, okay? Like it does.
esoteric. Okay, great word. Listen, it's 7:30 in the morning for me. So you're into the esoteric, but you also have a deep understanding of the science. Bring back the concept of parallel thinking. How do you blend the two? Because obviously, if people have been listening deeply, you're still working with a person.
Mhm. We are such complex creatures. And,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about the, does it happen in your mind first and then it happens in your body? Does it happen in your body first and then it happens to your mind? How much are the, like, you're feeling like crap. You go to the gym and you work out, you come back, you feel great. So was that your body actually didn't feel good and your brain was reading it from your body? Or so there's so many different pieces. And then guilt and shame, which is a huge part
Oof.
of what I'm doing. It was really interesting what you were saying about this, becoming objective, because that's what guilt and shame robs us of, right? So
Mm.
let's say I am, what's a good example? Like, let's say I have a kink of men's feet. Okay. I'm really into men's feet, right?
Ew.
But don't yuck someone's yum. Okay. That's not how we
Fair.
do this, Paul.
All right. Sorry. I just know my feet are gross.
Okay. Not your feet. I'm into some other guy's feet. Okay.
Okay.
And that's my thing, but I'm so embarrassed. Like, everybody's going to think I'm weird. Maybe I told one person and they laughed at me.
Hmm.
Maybe, I don't know, but I've gotten this message that it's weird and it's gross and I shouldn't talk about it. Right. And it's like, we shove it down into this box inside of us. And this box can, like, to me, anytime you have something that causes you guilt and shame, it's leaky as fuck. Like, that stuff is coming out in ways that you don't want it to. The more you try to force and push through guilt and shame, the less likely you are to actually contain that thing. The more likely it is to fester and become a bigger problem. So that manifests as the energy. Maybe now I'm really snappy with men, because I have this like thing that I'm embarrassed about and I don't want them to know. And anytime they kind of chit chat with me, I get like really, really snappy and aggressive, right? That's an emotional reaction. And do you want to tell me that your emotions are not impacting your body? Like, that's the whole thing with yoga. Like, why is there this stereotype about like, like yogis being so chill and just, it's not, but it's a stereotype for a reason, like
Most of the yogis I know are so type A, it's painful.
yeah, sure. But there's this like idea of like your emotional body is impacting your physical body. I don't necessarily ascribe to, if I have a bad relationship with my boyfriend, then my left hip's going to be tighter than my right hip, or my right hip is tighter than my left hip, because the right side's my masculine, and then like I don't necessarily. And I do 100% believe that we're storing this stuff in our tissues. For example, the amount of people who have chronic like tension in their pelvic floor is unreal. I would say the biggest issue, if I had to get on my soapbox for a second, everybody has fucking tight pelvic floors and then they do goddamn Kegels and they just make it more tight. It's like you have tight biceps and you think to yourself, I'll go to the gym and do curls and that'll make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so frustrating. Why do we have tight pelvic floor muscles, right? Could be so many things. I don't think it's coincidence that the majority of us have guilt and shame around our sexuality and pleasure, and the muscles where that experience is being had is tight as fuck. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like
I totally know what you're saying.
So I feel like there's a really important navigation of, I don't think it's like a chicken or an egg. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. These are the issues that you're dealing with. Know the person. So some people I meet, they need to deal with the emotional component first.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are so in their head and they've been spiraling over this issue for so long that they need to deal with their body first, just to interrupt the thought pattern. So it really depends on who you're with, what their issue is, where they're at in the current state, but you definitely have to deal with it on a multi-layered approach.
I actually really love that concept because, whether you approach it esoterically through, the masculine energy or whatever, or, the solar, whatever, the concept is true that when you are stressed, your central nervous system becomes more sensitive. And
Yes.
when it becomes more sensitive and more reactive, you are going to run into issues with everything that the central nervous system impacts. You're going to run into gut issues. You're going to run into sexual health issues. You're going to run into increased perceptions of pain and decreased mobility. And we see this all the time. Like, I'll use myself as an example. I'm prepping for a bodybuilding show. I'm just under 3 weeks out. My stress is high. My sleep isn't awesome. My workload with work hasn't changed because, I'm still a busy guy. Well, guess what? The hip issues that I've dealt with in the past and had managed quite well, they're starting to flare up a little bit. Now, I know that and I have objectivity around what's happening and I know the tools that I need to implement. But guess what? The best thing that I do for myself and my hip, breath work. It's like, why do I do that? Well, because breath work is a gateway to the central nervous system to downregulate. Oh, funny how that works. I think people try to be super mechanistic and like, okay, it's the angle of your pelvis and the rotation and the expansion of your posterior sacrum and like, yeah, maybe, but maybe it's because you're super stressed and you're breathing up into your chest all day.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're sitting at your desk too much and not getting enough steps.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be. As long as you have some sort of way to, I don't want to use the word diagnose, but like to really dive into the issue and develop some sort of objectivity,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to be able to solve it. I also love what you said about, the person being in their own head and spiraling. I work with a lot of type A people. I work with a lot of very high achieving people in areas of their life. And without fail, as you've kind of alluded to, there is something outside of their work or outside of their training that is negatively affected by the thing that has allowed them to be so successful.
Yes. Yes.
That is one of the most eye-opening things for me that, has changed my coaching practice. And, I'd love to hear like when you're working with these sorts of people, like you identified that you work with high achieving humans. What is the issue that you see the most with these types of people? And perhaps what are some of the tools that you use to kind of open the gates a little bit for them?
I think we have this fear that in order to have accomplished this, like if I change things now, I'll lose this.
Mm,
This is what makes me, right? This identification in something. So again, this comes back to a holistic approach. It's like, okay, so let's zoom out of this. Let's zoom out of who you envision yourself as and like what can you feel in your body. A great that's a kind of an abstract way to say, but I was thinking about as you were talking, interestingly about sex, is you have to be able to play around with we'll simplify it, like your sympathetic and your parasympathetic response, right?
mhm.
Because if you're in fight or flight, you're never going to orgasm. But if you're in parasympathetic, you're never going to experience arousal. So what I think is really interesting about sex is that you're able to have really exciting, pleasurable sex when you are able to experience, like I'll say, like the waves of your nervous system fluctuating. Okay.
Mhm.
This is like the most nerdy description of good sex you've ever heard. But like the best sex I've ever had, I knew what was happening is my nervous system, like I would get spiked, I would get like aroused and excited, and I'd be in that, that do mode and that accomplished, but I can't
Yeah.
orgasm from that position. If I hold my breath, if I'm breathing really, 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 really fast, and I struggle with orgasm, I'll never reach climax if that's the
Mm.
position that I'm in. I need to be able to regulate so that my body feels like it can drop, it can relax, it can still have that space. So I think that that's a really important tool to have. Breathing, absolutely. Like you're talking about a form of breathing practices that's going to down regulate you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can we do up regulating breathing and can we do down regulating breathing? Can we,
Right.
the majority of our society doesn't generally need an up regulation practice. They need a down regulation practice.
Okay.
And one of the things that I really love, and this is like old school, it's called Brahmari breath in yoga. Translates to like humming bee breath, but essentially what it is humming. Okay. Now, when you are having sex, moaning is fantastic. So outside of the fact that there's like a fascial connection, a very, very direct link between what's happening in your jaw and what's happening in your pelvis,
Mm.
humming, obviously the vibrations help to relax any tension you have in your jaw. It's also like stimulates the vagus nerve, and it also encourages that moaning sound. So like one
Mm.
practice that I get so many of my clients to do, I have a playlist called the Humming Playlist, and I don't know why it has like 1,600 saves on Spotify. So I don't know if everybody out there is just learning to moan better. That would be my dream. But essentially, it's just a playlist with all songs that you can hum to. So my clients have to pick a song, and every day they have to sit and they have to hum this entire song. And it sounds so silly, but that's the thing, is that these quote unquote like silly, simple practices, 99% of the time, the issue you're facing, no matter how big it is, probably the solution is annoyingly simple.
Oh
And it
yeah.
can be as simple as humming. Like I've had women who've never orgasmed in their life do a consistent humming practice, and then suddenly they're experiencing orgasms. Like there's probably other factors, like the fact that they're talking to me about it, which means that they're able to face this guilt and shame. So there's other factors, but I would say this like ability to release tension and regulate your nervous system, sometimes it's as simple as humming to a song, you know?
It's really funny that you mentioned, the solution to complex problems is usually very simple. So I have this theory that we search for complex solutions because it's embarrassing to believe that my challenging issue can be solved by something simple.
It's so true.
Right.
It's so
So
true.
you end up in this situation where like, whatever issue that you're dealing with, like obviously in my world, it's nutrition or it's training, but you get into this situation where like, oh, it's this lack of external rotation in my left hip leading to a shift into my right hip and valgus in my right knee. It's like, maybe, or maybe your feet are set uneven, right? And for me to say that, and for me to like show them the video of, hey, your right foot is 2 inches in front of your left foot. But the reason they search for that is because it's way easier on your ego to
Yeah.
believe that you can't solve a complex problem versus I can't solve a simple problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes someone else to pull you out of that and be able to see the big picture of, yeah, maybe your hands are just off center, or maybe the bar is to the right by 2 inches, or whatever it might be. And it's just so interesting for me to see the parallels between different coaching practices and how you see the same things that I'm seeing, but
Yeah.
just in a different light. Um, I want to return back to the coach client relationship, and I think a lot of this fostering a healthy coach athlete relationship comes down to the way that you actually model your business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, what I mean by that is from the moment you first meet somebody or are exposed to them, whether it be they see you on social media or they book a call with you, usually the call comes after the exposure to social media. At each touch point, we are fostering that relationship. So, from that initial view on social media to the sales call, to the client purchase, to the onboarding, to the actual way that you implement the coaching practice and track variables. Can you take me through like your client's journey? Because I think that'd be really interesting for people to hear about, like how you structure your business model
Yeah.
versus, maybe the way that they structure theirs.
So it's interesting to me, like if we're talking about this parallel, because I do struggle with, we talked earlier about like you're the product of what you're trying to sell, right? So like short of getting an OnlyFans, I can't
No.
really advertise. And that's something I really have worked hard on is I don't want my social media to be about sexualizing me as Jenna Switzer. I want it to
Right.
be someone that you see as, yes, I am a sexual being, and I am not the object of sexual desire for you. I am
Right.
an information source. And I think that it's really an interesting experience. And so I would say that's also a really interesting experience. My perception is for coaches who do nutrition or, fitness plans or weight loss programs or whatever, I find it very interesting because you want people to see you as a source of information, not just, wow, I wish I had their body. I think that that's a really interesting balance we all have to navigate as coaches. So how do you
Well,
establish?
I'm gonna interrupt you there because I will say that if you are using your body to get clients, those clients are gonna suck. And
Okay.
and I truly believe that. So yes, I'm prepping for a show, and yes, I am obviously going to be posting more of my body online. The clients who will come to you simply because they want to achieve what you've achieved are not going to be good clients because their motivations are external to themselves.
Mm,
So what you're discussing in that you want to be a source of information, but you also want to be a product of your product and share some of your journey along the way. That's how you bridge the gap. You say, hey, I am where I am, but I'm only here because I went through this journey and I can help guide you through this journey.
yeah.
So I sorry I interrupted you, but I just
No,
needed to kind of
I think that's
hit
a
that home.
really important point for people to be hearing. So I would say you generally, honestly, like it's 50-50. Sometimes my clients follow me, sometimes they don't follow me because they're too nervous to be following a sex coach on Instagram.
Oh, fair.
So sometimes I'll get DMs. Like I go through my request folder more often than anybody, not because I enjoy all the creepy stuff, but
Dick pics, yep.
yeah, all the dick pics I get. But I do, like a lot of people who don't actually follow me will DM me from there. I do find people often, I found this really interesting. A lot of people find me through other fitness friends that I have. I have a lot of people who are in the health and wellness space. And, whether it's like, we're in each other's stories or whatever, that seems to be pretty consistent. Um, and people like to feel like they know me. So it's wildly uncommon for someone to just have seen my account or just have been introduced to my content and then decide to contact me. Like almost never.
I would say that parallels fitness coaching now.
Yeah.
That's been a change for sure because the industry is so big and there's so many coaches. People are much more discerning with how they spend their money.
Yes.
So having those conversations has become much more important. It's also elongated that sales cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
it used to be around. I did the math a while back.
Of course.
It used to be around 21 days, where the initial contact with somebody via DM or email or whatever it might be, to the point where they purchase your coaching was about 21 days. Now it's closer to 6 months.
Wow. Yeah, I would have said easy 3 to 6 months
Yep,
for me. And sometimes it's years, like some people follow me for
doesn't surprise me.
years before they get the nerve to like actually talk to me about the issue.
Hmm.
And I get it. This is a really tough thing. What I will say about my sales call is like my closing rate is astronomically high
Right.
because by the time you're brave enough to hop on a Zoom call and talk to someone about what's happening in your sex life, by the time it's gotten to that point, you're basically ready to do whatever it takes.
Yeah. So
So,
that stage of decision making, they're just further along that like pre-contemplation,
yes.
contemplation stage. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely the like price objection. Like, I do charge a premium for what I do. And so I do run into that. And I
Which
like,
boggles my mind when you think about the return on investment.
I know. But the thing that I really struggle with is like some people, like, for some reason, it's like getting the body you want. It's like, oh my God, yes, or like some effing random person who's never run a business is going to teach you how to run a business, and you're going to make, six figures this year by launching your online course about fuck all. It's like somehow we're willing to pay those people. But like this relationship with a person that you love, and it's make or break, man. Like you can't possibly believe that you've been sexless for 3 years in your marriage and you think that you're just going to keep going along and nothing's, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Man, like I so I'm sitting here in probably the healthiest, most incredible marriage that I could ever hope for. One that like I never would have imagined existed.
mm,
And if you told me that there was a problem, or if I was running into a problem in my marriage and you told me, hey, Paul, it's going to cost you 50 grand or 100 grand or what, I would fucking pay it 10 times over just to get to where I am today.
yeah.
So, sorry, a bit of a rant and subtle flex, but like,
Good. I want you to
um,
flex on this all the time because I love this for you so much. We've been friends for a very long time, and I
yeah,
love your relationship. I love how in love you are. It's beautiful.
yeah.
But
So, I mean, the
to
price
your
objection
point,
to me boggles my mind. But anyway, continue. Sorry.
no, I do want to. When I was trying to come up with my pricing, I had someone sit me down and they're like, okay, put yourself in the scenario. So I was married when I was younger and sex was a real issue for us. We both really, well, yeah, we both struggled. Communication was the real problem, but it felt
Mhm.
like it was sex. And my friend was like, okay, envision that you're that version of you. And somehow you're able to communicate to that version of you that this version of you exists, right? This person that is able to have sex and have orgasms and feel intimate and feel no shame and guilt or embarrassment about desires and all that. How much is that version of you willing to pay? And I was like, I would fucking remortgage my house. Like
Yeah.
I would take public transit and sell my car. Like I cannot imagine the price that I would pay if
Yeah.
I knew what I have now is available. No price. There's no price.
It's the discussion of price is so interesting to me because I mean, so I am a business coach. So I have this conversation all the time, right?
Yeah.
Initial price point, the easiest way to determine it is for most of my clients come to me, their personal training in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
I say, how much do you charge an hour for personal training? And they'll say $100. I'm like, cool. You're probably going to spend 2 hours with each client per month if you're working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Charge $200 a month to start, and then that'll get you in the door. Cool. Easy conversation.
Yep.
But once you're to the point where you have experience and you have evidence and you've built a reputation, like people ask me all the time, hey, how much do you charge for coaching? Well, I charge $525 a month
Mm-hmm.
because I have the evidence that I can solve your problems and get you to where you want to go. And I've proven that over the last 20 years. That is like, to me, that's also a reasonable price point for the value that I'm adding to somebody's life
Absolutely.
when it comes to training and nutrition. Now, on the business side of things, I charge 10 times that
Yes. Okay.
because
Good.
I can
Yeah.
I can prove unequivocally that by spending this $5,500, it will lead to $15,000 of revenue
Mm-hmm.
or $20,000 of revenue. And I do that with math.
Yeah.
So I can prove the ROI with your coaching practice. That ROI might not be something that someone can conceptualize because for them, it seems so far out of reach.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things you've been putting out material about this recently, and I've been really thinking about how to integrate it is this referrals, right?
Mm.
So one of the things I really struggle with is I do not get referrals, man. For some reason, people don't seem to want to tell their friend about how shitty their sex life was and how great it is
Oh,
now,
yeah.
And so it's not, I mean, I literally can't think of one referral I've ever had because it's just not a conversation people are willing to have. And for the first 3 years of coaching, I couldn't even get people to like do a video testimonial. Like they were too embarrassed to, like
Yeah,
they didn't even have to
that's a
say what
tough
the
nut to
problem was.
crack. Yeah.
So for years, it's like I have all these anonymous testimonials, but like an anonymous testimonial could be written by yours truly and just posted.
100%.
So,
Yeah.
now I have a few more people who have been, quite a bit braver. One, I have had two clients who are just like adorable. They're out there dating and they actually have it in their dating profile that they're like, actively working with a sex coach. And they're like, I just want people to know that sex is so important to me that I'm willing to invest in it. So that kind of
Hmm.
stuff like gets me excited and I'm happy that's a thing. But it's been a really interesting experience as a sex coach. Like referrals are huge, huge. And I have no idea at this point how to harness that power in any capacity. So that's something that I'm definitely exploring, something that I think is really important that you touch on a lot, and I think it's really powerful. But definitely for sex coaching, it's an interesting thing to navigate.
So I have some thoughts on that. So what pops out to me that you could do that would be still anonymous, but would serve the purpose of a testimonial, I call it showing your receipts. So if you were able to share a client's journey
Mm-hmm.
through your coaching practice in some capacity, it would give people an insight into what they're being provided.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be necessarily referrals, but you would be able to leverage those testimonials a little bit better.
Yep.
So that, and in that same light, the next question I would have for you is like, what does the onboarding process like for you? Do you have education that goes along with your coaching? Do you have, any sort of lessons, or do you just jump right into, hey, we're going to do calls on a X number of week basis and I
Yeah.
give you homework and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I would say that's generally. I have a 3-month program. I want to work with whoever I'm working with 3 months. That's
Mhm.
minimum. And so even if we'll call it like there's a more intensive or a light version, it's always 3 months. That's really important to me. As far as the onboarding process, no, like there's a coaching agreement that we both have. We always have. I always have that initial sales call, so that
Mhm.
I fully understand what they're asking for. They fully
Right.
understand what I'm providing. But as far as the onboarding, I've actually just switched this up. So I have an online course now called Beyond Kegels. And this course is essentially what I spend the first session of every coaching call doing, is like basically giving a high level understanding of what's happening in your body physically, why it's important to understand your pelvic floor muscles, how to engage them, practices that are to engage them. And it's essentially taken out my first one-on-one call because, you know, maybe I'm not supposed to use this anymore because you can't say tribe, but whatever. Your vibe attracts your tribe, right? So
Mhm.
I generally attract people who are a little bit woo, but really love the anatomy. And
Okay.
the anatomy for me is often the people feel it in their own body. They can feel a sensation and it has quick results. It's
Right.
I give you something that's going to make a quick change, and then that gives you the momentum to keep making changes.
Mhm.
So that's why I like that piece. So I created the course partly so that I just want everyone to understand how their pelvic floor works. I want there to be something that I can offer to the world. But also now, as I'm starting to onboard clients, I give them that course. So, our first session is in 3 weeks. I would like you to have reviewed the material from this before that 3 weeks. And then that saves me from having to do this like same thing over and over, and I can make it more personal, right?
Yep. Yep. I love it. And how does your coaching practice work? Like, I mean, in training, nutrition, we've got tracking sheets, we've got biometrics, we've got, programs that people follow, we've got macros. How does that work in a sex coaching practice?
So generally, I do every 2 weeks. We do a call. We do a
Okay.
face-to-face call. In between, there's homework practices that are specific for you.
Okay.
I use an app called Voxer. Have you heard of Voxer?
Voxer. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I use Voxer for my clients because for two reasons. One, I don't. My work is my work, and my friends are my friends, and I don't like to be in my Instagram trying to like. I don't know. Did I miss it? Did I reply? I don't know. Voxer is the place where I have all my clients, but also
Yep.
for my clients, almost nobody uses Voxer outside of coaching. So
Mhm.
they know that when they're in this app, this is what we're talking about.
Yep.
So we have a weekly check-in. How was this practice? How is this feeling? What are you experiencing? A lot of clients are really ready to have these types of conversations. So they'll be messaging me, right? Like, oh, I had sex last night and I was so in my head, like, I faked an orgasm again. And they have that person to have these conversations. So it's less about, I can't even imagine what kind of like metric sheets or like handouts I could give to people. I've considered this
Yeah.
in the past, but I think these like personalized practices is kind of more what's happening. Some of them are pretty consistent. Like there's some that I offer to everybody. Anybody listening to this, a really powerful practice is to make a note of your non-sexual pleasures. A lot of people who have a hard time or like a low libido, um, they get so caught up in the sex part that they lose the like enjoying it part, right?
Hmm.
So make a list, ongoing list of the things that you really, really love, that you just really feel, and you totally like lose track of time. You're just totally savoring. Make a list of those things. One of the things for me is like when it's really hot and there's a breeze. That is one of the best feelings in the world. My first sip of coffee in the morning,
Hmm.
like you're smelling it, and then you go to take that first, like it's so good. So like that's a homework practice that I give often that I think everybody should do. That ongoing, because it conditions you to be aware of pleasure and enjoying sensations and making space in your life to enjoy those sensations, so that when you go into the bedroom, it doesn't feel like such a light switch, like an on off. I was
Hmm.
ignoring everything and just trying to get through my day, and now I've got to be present and feel the feelings. It's like, no, make it a part of your day. So there are some things that are consistent between clients, but a lot of it's personalized stuff, right?
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me. And I mean, this is returning back to one of the points that we made early in our conversation. Is like there is no rule book to how coaching needs to be administrated,
Mm,
right? So whether your coaching practice is holistic sex coaching or nutrition or training or business, like to be completely fair, my business coaching, I don't have systems because it would be again, it would be a disservice to the people that I'm serving. I the same way as you, like we do our calls, I give you homework based on how you're progressing through it, and we go at the speed that you're able to go. Right? If you had a systematized plan, a program, a 3-month program that was strategized to the T, but that person couldn't work through it at that pace, well, then you're not going to be providing the service you need to provide. So
yeah.
I'm really glad that you said that. And I'm almost glad that you don't have a system because I think people need to hear that. I think they need to hear that, hey, there are no rules. And however it is that you help people, I just, the cat, um, however it is that you help people, as long as you get results, that's all that
Mm,
matters.
so true.
Um,
Okay.
usually I do like, go ahead. Yeah, go
True.
ahead.
And I do want to say, for people who are, again, your vibe attracts your tribe. So I feel like the people that you attract are more type A organized people, right? And they need to be told that it doesn't need to always be
Yeah. I need
systematized
to
and in
pull them in the other
forms,
direction.
right? And if you are in the other direction of like, I just want to make a change in people's lives, like, these things don't matter. It's like actually the structure, the framework gives you both a sense of understanding of what this
Right.
container is, So
Yeah. So,
for me, like I have pillars of coaching, and then they
mhm.
completely change based on what I'm looking at, how much time we spend on each one, if we need to bring in another piece. But I know if I just have to describe this, because there's moments where you need to have your elevator pitch, right? Like
Right.
how are you able to convey? And if you're in this area of like, oh, I just work with the person and help them get what they need,
Yeah. That
that's
doesn't
a
give
shit
anyone any
elevator pitch,
information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is usually I finish these podcasts with like quick hit questions and stuff like that, but I think it would do it a disservice. Um, maybe we finish off with like 3 tips that people can implement as coaches within their practice to foster better relationships with their clients.
um Let me think on this. One thing I think is really important is to celebrate wins that aren't necessarily direct wins to what you're trying to accomplish.
Love that. Yep.
So we think or I tended to, for a long time, just be focused on, I'm not your buddy here, and when you are there for the small things, it makes they really feel like you're in their corner.
Yep.
You see me in all aspects, so you know that this is such a big win. I think that's a really important piece. Remembering that the person in front of you wants to change.
Mm-hmm.
I have some coaches that I've spoken to over time, and they get this like frustrated, like, they just don't do what I say, and like they're not listening to anything and blah blah blah. And I'm like, this is on you, like it is our
fault.
job as coaches. They want to change, otherwise they wouldn't be spending their money and their time with us. So
Absolutely.
if they're not doing what we're saying, how do we support them anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Don't like, I know there's different coaching strategies, but especially for what I do, it's like, it's pointless for me to come down on you and be like, what do you mean you faked another orgasm? Like, you said you weren't gonna, what has that done? Okay, cool. You faked an orgasm. Okay, cool. What else is new?
Let's dive into it.
Yeah. How did that feel? Like, that's something, how did that feel? So I would say, celebrate all the wins. Be curious. So important. Remember, the person in front of you is a person they do want to change. That is important. And I think stay open to learning.
Yeah.
We as coaches want to be right. We want to know the answer. And being open to learning and, letting someone know, oh, this is, what's a good example of something. I don't know. I can't think of anything, but I'll just make something up, like, oh, you're having pain during sex, but only pain during sex during ovulation. Right. It's like, oh, I've dealt with pain during sex before, but that it's only happening around ovulation. That's really interesting. I'm really excited to dive into this with you. And this could be a whole bunch of different things. I'm actually not sure why ovulation in particular would cause this to happen. So let's explore it, so you don't need to know all the answers. And the more you can admit to what you do know and what you're able to help them uncover based on your knowledge, amazing. Then they feel like you're on the journey with them.
Yeah. The words, I don't know, followed by the words, but I can find out, are probably one of the most important professional things that you can do within the coaching practice. The other question that I ask my clients often is, especially when they're struggling, is how do you need me to support you through this? I often ask because I'm a very solutions oriented person, but sometimes people aren't looking for solutions. They're looking for understanding and empathy.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just want you to sit in the mud with them.
Yes.
And that's okay. Like, holding space for people is okay.
Yeah.
But regardless, I love those tips. Jenna, this was an awesome conversation. I think better than the first one.
I think it was too.
Yeah. So I hope the audience understands like how much value that you can glean from this, even though it isn't a traditional strength and conditioning, nutrition, coaching practice. There's so many parallels to be drawn. And I really appreciate you sharing your time.
My pleasure. It's honestly, we've talked about this before, that I really have found it interesting that even though I've gone from like yoga teaching to sex coaching, I'm still able to learn so much, like from the way you approach the business, the way you approach your clients, and the way I find it so interesting that you and I have maintained these parallel ideas throughout this whole evolution we've both been on,
Absolutely. So I'll have links to where everyone can find you in the show notes. And everyone, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.